Aloha everybody, and welcome to the Acrylic Asylum. I'm Mike Ferris, and I'm coming at you from the big island of Hawaii. And in this video, I'm going to be painting this Hawaiian fish that I hear is hard to catch, but is very delicious when eaten. So the name of this fish is called an Ulua. And I'm starting off with a couple pieces of paper, and I'm going to tape those together using painter's tape. And these papers I'm using are 8 by 11 inches, and the canvas I'm going to be using is 11 by 14. So I'm going to be cutting this paper down to the exact size of my canvas, as you see here. This is a hardboard canvas I'm using, and I'm just going to make a line where it ends there, and I'll just fold it and tear it off. So now I'm going to lay out these lines with my ruler, and I want to make a grid using 1 inch by 1 inch squares. So I actually should be using a pen, and I forgot to grab one initially, and I started drawing the lines, and then I realized, you know what, I don't want to erase these lines when I do go to draw it in and I have to change stuff. So I'm actually going to switch to orange pen now. And so now that the grid is just about on here, I am going to put letters going across on the top and numbers going down the bottom. That way I can pinpoint exactly everything in this picture to be located like it should be. Okay, so now I have the fish drawn on, and I would recommend pausing if you're following along, and just go ahead and generally do what I did. I did 1 inch by 1 inch squares again. My size is 11 by 14, but you can do whatever size you want and just grid it generally about the same. So I'm sticking some wax paper underneath, and right now I'm just going to draw where the ocean floor is, because I'm going to have to do a background first, and I don't want to cover up my fish and have to retrace it on. So this is all I'm going to do, is just this ocean floor line right here with my stylus. And behind, you can see that the line did show up just fine. And this is where I'm going to be starting off with. Okay, so I'm taking my flat brush now and dipping it into some water, and I'm just going to get my canvas wet just a little tiny bit, and that just helps move my paint around that much quicker. And I'm just going to dab a bunch of this Phthalo Blue all over, and that just helps save some time, because sometimes I just don't like to dip my paint into my palette over and over again. I kind of just want to get something covered without working so hard and so much. So this is going to be just kind of a lazy man's way of painting, if you will. And I'm just going to basically take the bottle and dab it all over like this, and that's just going to help me get it on there that much quicker. So this is just a base coat for now for the water. Okay, so I have this really cool jar cleaner here. It's a paintbrush cleaner that has these raised pegs that are different heights and shapes. And so I can rub my brush along the bottom of that, and it knocks all the paint off. But then I have a rinse jar here, and I give it one last final cleanse, because I don't want to mix any dirty water into new paint. And by doing it this way, I ensure that I have fresh paint throughout. So this is a mixture now of raw umber and a little bit of titanium white, and I'm going to make this white sand color. And this is just a base color that I'm starting off on the tip where the ocean water meets the floor. And while that paint that I put down earlier is still wet, I want to blend some of this sand color into that blue water just a little bit and drag some of that down into the sand, because that will help bring in the reflective light of the ocean water down onto the sand, and that will help create some depth and realism and make it actually look like the sand that you're seeing is in fact underwater. Okay, so now I want this all to dry so that I can put more layers and details on this, and I'm using a hair dryer because in Hawaii it is very wet and of course tropical, and if I don't do this then I'll be waiting literally several hours for this to dry. And acrylics really should only take maybe like 20 minutes tops when you're using them and you're trying to apply more layers on top of one another. Okay, so now I'm all dry here, and I'm taking some of this Phthalo Green and some Phthalo Blue, and then I'm going to put in some titanium white, and I'm going to make this turquoise color, but I want it more to the blue side, so I'm putting more Phthalo Blue in it like so. And now I'm just going to start dabbing it in random places to indicate the top or surface of the water where the light's hitting it. And basically I'm going to take this and then the Phthalo Blue and more or less play these colors back and forth with these random sort of watermark like actions that are going on, and I'm basically going to play it back and forth and build on top of one another until I get the depth and the realism of the water that looks the way that it more or less should. Okay, so now I just want to take the hair dryer again and dry this out because again it's too damp here, and I'm using it on medium heat. And so with this I am not wanting it to be wet when I put more layers and depth on, because if I do that then the new color I'm trying to knock back with is just going to mix with the color already on there if it's not dry all the way, and so you really will just get a ball of mud and basically a general color that'll just cover everything up, and there won't be any differences, and then you'll lose all that depth and texture. So very important to dry it out first. So I'm taking now some of that Phthalo Blue, and as you can see I'm knocking back some of this lighter color because it is dry, and so now I'm starting to get some more texture in there, and it's going to start looking more like the surface of the water here coming up soon. Okay, so now I'm taking that lighter color again, the Phthalo Blue and a little bit of Phthalo Green, and more to the blue side on that lighter color. And so I've added a little bit more titanium white now to it to brighten it up just a little bit more. And I want to really define some of these brighter, lighter areas where the sun is directly hitting and playing through some of these random spots on the surface. Okay, so now I'm going to mix up this really dark color that I'm going to start applying onto the ocean floor with some permanent black and raw umber. And this is just basically just a bunch of debris and some rock and just texture for the ocean floor. And so with what I'm going to use now is, this is a little demonstration of a painter's sponge, and as you can see it has all these holes and uneven tears and scragglies on it, and so I'm going to be using it like you see here to dab these texture pieces onto the ocean floor. So I'm going to get it wet like so and squeeze out the water so it's just damp, and now I'm just going to tap it into my color, that black and that raw umber mixture, and with that I'm just going to start dabbing it all over the place in random spots. So again, after drying it, now I'm going to start taking that beige color again, and I'm just going to start sort of just scratching it in here and there and sort of covering over some of this debris, because that's going to create more texture and more depth. And we're going to change the brown color in just a moment, but this is just to build up the sand bottom and make it more realistic. Okay, so now I'm getting some burnt sienna and mixing just a teeny bit of titanium white in it, and it's basically a reddish brown color that now I'm going to start dabbing in and applying with my brush. Okay, so along the way I'm going to put down some of this matte medium, and I'm going to make that turquoise color that I blended into the sand from earlier. And by putting some matte medium into that color, it's going to allow that color to become transparent. And so when I go over some of the ocean floor in certain spots, it's going to give that impression more or less that the color of the water is reflecting their color off of the ocean floor, and that just creates more of that realistic effect of being underwater. Now I'm taking that turquoise color from before with the Phthalo Green, Phthalo Blue, and a little bit of white, and just making that light color, and I'm barely putting any color on my brush and dipping a lot of matte medium on it. And again, that's going to make this color transparent. As you can see, I'm dusting over and you can still see the floor through it, and it gives that impression again of reflective light from the color of the water onto the floor, as well as making the floor look like it's fading into the deep blue in the background. So now back to this beige color again, and once again I'm knocking back some of this texture that I put down before and just sort of mingling that in and scratching it here and there, and that creates more actions and depth into the sand. Okay, so with these actions on that beige color, as I get towards the meeting place of the floor and the water, these actions are going to be a little bit smaller because it's saying that there's depth and that it's getting further away and that the ocean floor is in fact fading into the deep blue. so now that everything's dry, I've pretty much got my background where I want it. And so I'm going to go ahead and use my black transfer paper. Now I should be using white or gray, but being that I just moved, I haven't been able to find it just yet, so I'm using what I have found so far, and that would be the black, even though it is against this dark blue. And you're not going to be able to see the lines, but that's okay, because from my angle I can see them enough to where I'm blocking in everything as it should be. Okay, so now my image is on, and I'm taking this Paynes Grey and a little bit of titanium white to make this mid-tone bluish gray color. And with that, I'm just going to start applying that with the values more or less where they go, and then I'll start adjusting and applying texture with different colors on top of that. But for the most part, this is going to be basically a base coat of more or less a Paynes Grey type of color with some variations and values back and forth. Okay, so now I'm taking just a little bit more titanium white to that Paynes Grey color and brightening up just a little bit more on the top of them right here. And so what I'm going to do now is take that Paynes Grey and I'm going to lighten it, and then other times leave more white out of it and have it darker. And so by changing the values, I'm going to be putting them more or less where they go and blocking everything in, and then I'll start building texture of details on top of that. Okay, so now I'm just taking just plain Paynes Grey. I'm not putting any light in it at all because I want it dark for this fin right here. And so again, just changing the value again by not adding any white in it, and that distinguishes the difference between his texture, where light's hitting him, and where some of his darker colors go. Okay, hitting the eyeball with a little bit of plain Paynes Grey there, and now just taking some titanium white and just a teeny bit of the Paynes Grey, and just going to hash in some of these texture marks on the top of them. Now I'm taking some of that darker color of just the plain Paynes Grey. Plain Paynes Grey, say that 10 times fast. And then with that same dark color, I'm just going to dab in a few little these spots on his side right there. And now I'm just going to go up to the fin area and apply some of that dark color just in a few spots here and there to give it some depth and shadow to it as well. So just taking that Paynes Grey and again just using the different values, sometimes lighter, sometimes darker. As you can see, we use some of the lighter stuff, and I put in some more of the actions on his top fin. And so now adding a little bit more titanium white to brighten up the Paynes Grey even more. And with that, I'm just going to go ahead and go over some of these hash areas and things that are happening on top of his body. Now taking this lighter Paynes Grey with titanium white in it, and I'm just going to hit the edges of some of these fins and bring out some of their details. Now I'm going to grab some Phthalo Blue and I'm going to mix it into this Paynes Grey. And if you didn't know, Paynes Grey is actually made using Phthalo Blue and a mixture of black. And so, being that it already has a bluish hue to it, I went ahead and put a little bit more of the Phthalo Blue in with the Paynes Grey, and then added some titanium white. As you can see, there's like this blue sort of color going on in the face. And actually that's a little bit more blue than I want, but for now it's going to serve the purpose of an undercoat or something that's going to sort of show through when it's all finished, and that's going to actually work in my favor to bring out somewhat of a reflective light from the ocean watercolor onto the fish. Okay, so just playing the values back and forth, putting textures and hashes where they go. And now what I'm going to do is take a small flat brush and dip it into a lot of water. And now I've got a mixture of permanent black and Paynes Grey because I want to go a little darker now. And I'm just going to flick the paint right off my brush and sort of splatter it in random places on the body. And anything that I do that I don't like, I can just come right back after I dry it with the blow dryer again and cover it right back up with the color that I do want there instead. And so this is a really cool thing about acrylics. So as you can see up close, I've got that kind of splattered on there, and it's creating some of this flesh of this Ulua fish, and just kind of spraying it on. You can even use a toothbrush if you want. And so see, there's a little bit more black on the face there than I want, but that's okay because I'm just going to dry that again with the blow dryer. And I'm going to come in there and just knock some of that back, but not all of it, because I do want some black there. And it will turn out just fine. Okay, so now I'm just going to take pretty much just plain titanium white. It might have just a hint of that Paynes Grey in there, but I doubt it. It's mostly just white now. And now I'm going to go back over and again do these hash marks along the top of his body as I see in the reference photo. Now taking my detail brush, I am going to dip it into some burnt sienna and titanium white. And I'm going to take you up close here so you can see right on the eye there where the flesh of the fish and the eyeball meet. There's this light sort of brownish color rim around the eye, and it's amazing because it's really easy to do, and just this little thing alone really brings out this eye and makes it come to life suddenly. So now taking some Paynes Grey and some Phthalo Blue to give it more of a blue hue to it, and lightening it up with some titanium white, I'm going to start hitting some of these crevices on his face and on some of his fin areas, and this is going to give more of that realistic effect of the watercolor hitting him. Now that I'm all dry, I'm going to go ahead and put my picture back on my canvas and retape it on as I had it, because during the tracing process I forgot to actually trace out the small guy. As you can see, he's further away and he's more towards the surface of the ocean. And so real quick, I'm just going to stick that wax paper down and just quickly just trace him out real quick, like really easy. He's further away, so obviously the details are not as much, and so blocking him in and adding some highlights and shadows here and there is going to be a lot quicker than what's in the foreground of the bigger fish. So again, just taking that Paynes Grey with a little titanium white and just going to block in and put the values where they go. And again, this isn't going to be as detailed, so it's just going to be a real quick, add some colors basically where they go, and that'll be that on that. Okay, I'm going to go back in with some final touches now, and I'm going to take that same sand beige color, and this time I'm going to put a little bit more titanium white in it and start applying that in different spots, and basically going over some more on the fish on some titanium white, and again adding more titanium white to the sand below. And that's going to indicate that light is hitting some areas directly, and other areas it's just light kind of bouncing off from other areas, so it's not as bright. And again, that just adds more depth and more realism to the whole picture. So now I'm taking this dark color, it's a little bit of permanent black and some raw umber, and just barely going to put that color mixture on my brush and lots of matte medium to make the transparent color effect. And I'm going to create a shadow from the fish and also some other divot and shadows that are happening in between the sandbar areas of the little hills and crevices that are on the ocean floor. And so again, this is going to add more realism, and it's going to make it more interesting to the eye when it's all finished. Okay guys, so I'm just going to go ahead and take my script liner brush, dip it in lots of water and titanium white to make it run like ink, and sign this piece right here. Okay everyone, there it is, the finished Hawaiian Ulua fish. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and like and comment. And if anyone would like a custom piece of anything, you can hit me at the description box below where you'll find links to get a hold of me, or you can just drop me a message if you'd like. And mahalo everyone for your support and for watching. Take care.